Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a chief tax collector, and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not. By the way, I may have mentioned this before, but the text doesn't say who was the short man. We always assume it was Zacchaeus. It could have been Jesus, because it doesn't say being a short man. Zacchaeus being a short man. We don't know if it's Zacchaeus or Jesus, but someone couldn't see him. Anyway, being a short man, he could not see him because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree and to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter. This, by the way, was the last encounter with an outcast before he enters Jerusalem. The very last outcast he encounters and changes life before Jerusalem is Zacchaeus. He's going to be the guest of a sinner, but Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man, too, is a son of Abraham." Just previously on his journey, he called a woman a daughter of Abraham for her faith. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. There we have it, the mission imperative of the church. The Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. And in the Gospel of Luke, that which is lost is just not those who are in danger of going to hell instead of to heaven, but also those who have found that this life is something that is not in any way what God intended for this life to be for all of us. They are persons who seem lost in life, this life. They don't know who they are, where they're going, or what life is about. They don't know why they're here. What is the purpose of their creation? In fact, they oftentimes despair of their creation and think that, they may have been, like Job, may have been better if they'd never been born. That's the lost. Not just those who don't know the glories of heaven, but those who do not know heaven on earth. They do not know anything of the joy of the Lord, or the power of God, or the majesty of their creation, or the worth of their being and their soul. That's who's lost. And that's what's so vitally important to this whole encounter of Jesus with Zacchaeus, because he was treated as an outcast but not a child of God. He was treated as an unworthy but not a human being that was in any way under God's notice. He's a famous man to us. We learned about him in Sunday school. We had a little song we sang to him. Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he? And how the rest of it goes. He climbed up. You want to finish it, anybody? Go ahead. Climbed up into a sycamore tree. The Lord he wanted to see. The Lord he wanted to see. And Jesus came and said, "Zacchaeus," and we always shook our finger at him up there in that sycamore tree. "Zacchaeus, you come down. I'm going to your house today." Like Jesus was scolding him instead of blessing him. But the truth is, in the scripture, he's blessing him. He's really blessing him. But he is actually restoring his dignity in that moment when he says, "Come down." You know, Zacchaeus is called the chief tax collector. That's not a title. In fact, those words do not appear anywhere else in Greek or Roman literature of that day. This is the only place you'll see that word, those words, chief tax collector. It's not a title, it's not an office. He has not been given some great commission by Rome or authority as chief tax collector. In fact, the phrase is more apt to mean that he was chief among the tax collectors, most effective, the one who raised the most taxes, the wealthiest of them. You see, tax collectors were private contractors that Rome gave the job to collect taxes for Rome. However, Rome had a system. They did not just take the taxes tax collectors collected. They made the tax collectors pay the tax ahead of time. So they had to pay Rome whatever tax was going to be owed to Rome. And then they had to go and get it from the people. Rome didn't care how much they got, as long as they paid Rome ahead of time what was going to be owed in tax. So they could go out and take whatever they wanted. Now, there were two reasons that tax collectors were hated. One of them was because they worked for Rome, and the second one was because they were greedy and corrupt, and they oppressed people, taking far more tax than was actually owed to Rome in order to make their living. And apparently, if he is the chief among tax collectors and one of the best in doing this, Zacchaeus did that, and therefore would be a very hated man. And now also a small man. Jewish people tended to be small in that day. The only, outside of the Bible, the only sources that we have that comment on Jesus remark that he was tall for a Jew, and that he had his hair parted in the middle, as was the practice of the Nazarenes, and that unlike most Jews, he had red hair. And that's how Josephus describes him. And so that's about the only other physical description we have of Jesus. We really don't have one in the Gospels, but Josephus gives us one. Tall, hair part in the middle, is the manner of the Nazarene. So now we know that in the story of Zacchaeus, his we are small, but not Jesus. And here we see in this scene, and it's so subtle it may be missed by us, but Zacchaeus is running and climbing a tree. And both of those actions were undignified for a man of his stature. Now, I'm not talking about his height, I'm talking about his place in the world. Men just didn't run. Men of a certain age. They did not run. It was undignified, it was humiliating. And they certainly didn't climb trees. We don't run. You know, men of a certain age still don't run. Couple getting out of a car, ready to go up to join a line, to get into an event. Child's there with them, grandchild's there with them, say, come on, Mom and Dad, we gotta hurry. The line, you can see the line's getting bigger. Or, come on, Grandpa and Grandma, we gotta hurry. You see the line's getting bigger. Get on ahead. We'll get there, we're not gonna run. And most of the time we can't because it's a neat issue. But, now people, I've seen people in their 60s jogging. By 70s, they're walking. But to run for something, we just don't do that. You know? And that was the way it was then. Nobody, men did not. They were dignified, and that was an undignified. That's what children do. Children run around, hidden in there, they're always running around, and they're always being scolded for that. Stop running. And we get the message. By the time we grow up, we don't run anymore. Then we get fat and old and can't run. But they don't run anymore. And then with Zacchaeus, he's running. And he's climbing a tree. I remember climbing trees as a boy. I haven't done that since I was a boy. I put my grandchildren up in trees. I don't climb trees anymore. And here's Zacchaeus trying to climb a tree and hide in the leaves of the sycamore, which is kind of like a pine tree. So he's getting stabbed by the needles. In everything, this man is acting in a very undignified manner. He risks his dignity in order to see Jesus. Song that we used to sing never say anything about that. So when Jesus comes by and points up to him and says, Zacchaeus, notice he didn't get an invitation from Zacchaeus. He invited himself into Zacchaeus' house. I don't know, today would not be considered good manners. Back then, if somebody said, I'm coming by your house and you're going to feed me, it might have been a concern to those who had to prepare the meal. But it was obviously a joyous thing to Zacchaeus, because when he said, I'm coming to your house today, he returned the dignity to the man that he had lost. First, because he was considered by his own people as a hateful, vile human being. And second, because in front of everybody in this large crowd, he has run and climbed a tree in his eagerness to see Jesus. And so when Jesus says, I'm coming to your house, he has returned to him what was lost. What was it inside of Zacchaeus that made him desire so much to see Jesus, to know Jesus, to get as close to Jesus as he could? He was a wealthy man. You and I may think he had everything. He had wealth. Of course, some people hated him, but who needs friends when you have money? Rich do not fare well in Luke's gospel. There was the farmer who was going to build more barns, and he's called the rich fool. There was the rich young man who came to Jesus wanting to know what it would mean to inherit eternal life, and Jesus told him, you got to do this, you got to give away everything you have and come follow me. And he went away because he was tied to his possessions. There's Lazarus and dives. It only appears in the Gospel of Luke. Lazarus is a poor man, and there's this rich man. In all his life, he treats Lazarus contemptuously as he begs outside his gate. He won't even give him the crumbs off of his table. And then when the rich man dies, he's in the flames of eternal hell, and he's burning up, and he's athirst, and he cries out to God, send me relief. And God said, have pardon me, have mercy upon me. And God refuses that. He says, well, send somebody to warn my brothers that this is the way. And God refuses that. And he says, all these years you treated Lazarus with such injustice. Well, that only appears in Luke. And then when Jesus is preaching, what oftentimes is called the Sermon on the Plain, because it's very similar to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel. Only in Luke's Gospel does Jesus say, blessings to the poor and woe to the rich. And of course, Luke repeats what every Gospel says when Jesus sees the rich man turn away from him. It'll be easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. But now we see Jesus just before he enters into Jerusalem. He's met a blind beggar on the road. That's just before he comes upon Zacchaeus. He returns that man's sight. He has been to the poor, and now he stands beneath this tree, and he points up to a despised human being who has a tremendous amount of wealth. In Luke, that's not a plus but a minus. And he looks up into that tree and he says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. Jesus came for all, rich or poor. And all can be redeemed by the Christ that we worship. And there are many out there who are like Zacchaeus, searching and seeking for the thing that only Jesus can give. We may not think that's true. We may think that the world has become greedy and self-possessed, and it no longer speaks spiritual things. We may think that the secular world has become deaf and indifferent to who we are as Christians. Oftentimes Christians are afraid to move out into a world they think is going to mock and scorn what they have to bring. And there's enough of it in this political season, I've noticed, scorning and mocking everything Christians have to say. And it goes on all the time in the media. I'm no one here today to trash media. That's somebody else can do that. But anyway, it does go on. And so we may think, let's just stay to ourselves and kind of, encourage one another maybe, support one another, have a good time together as the church with one another. But the world out there is kind of a risky place to go. It's kind of it's a place out there that just has turned off to us. And, why should we make the effort? And so therefore, we may not think that there's people of all classes and races out there in the world who are searching for something more than what they already have. But there are those people out there. I've encountered them in ministry. As I was preparing for the sermon, I thought of a man years and years ago. And one of the first years of my ministry, he had become quite wealthy by his mid-30s. He was an investment banker, and he had started out in a small community where his pastor was North Platte, but he had started out in that town as kind of like an investment banker with one of the firms, Edward D. Jones, or one of them, I forgot. But he had been able to accumulate a pretty fair amount of wealth. He had a house, he had a wife, he had 2 children, and everything was set for him. And he started coming to church, and I went over to visit him. And found out very quickly that he was coming to church because he just felt like there was something so missing in his life. He said, I really ought to be happy. I mean, I've got this house mostly paid for. I got fine cars. I got my wife. She's got a pretty good job. Doesn't have to work full time. And she works doing what she wants to do. We got 2 children, 2 girls, 2 little girls. I ought to be happy, but I'm not happy. And I don't understand this. I was told that, as we all were told, the American dream can really make you happy, and it's still a myth today. And that was kind of what was his myth. And suddenly, the reality came against the myth, and he realized that he was pretty much at the place where he had more than most anybody his own age had. And he should have been ecstatic, but happy, but he wasn't. He wasn't. So we talked about that. Tried to lead him to the Lord. And he continued to come to church. And then one day he called me. It was a Saturday at home. He called me. He said, Pastor, you've got to come here. I don't know what's happening. I went over to his house. He'd been out in the sandbox with his daughters. He'd been pushing them on the swing, playing in the sand with them. And while he was digging around in the sand, he suddenly had a vision of Jesus right there in the sand. A very powerful vision. He saw Jesus. He said it was as real as you and I. When he was telling me about it, he says, you're going to think I'm crazy that I've lost it. But there was this Jesus in the sandbox. And he said, I don't know. He was trying to tell me something, and I don't understand what he was trying to tell me, but here he was. That just changed his whole man's life. He had not accepted Christ. He didn't come to church. Boy, the next Sunday, he was down front accepting Jesus as his Lord and Savior. He got baptized, his wife got baptized, the girls got baptized, everybody, the whole household. And that's kind of the way it kind of works these days, too, still. And when Zacchaeus changes, his whole household is converted. And that was the way with this man. He knew that God had suddenly called him to some other form of life. And he embraced it with such zeal. After that, all he wanted to do was listen to Christian music, read his Bible. His wife complained to me. He just wants to read his Bible and pray and listen to Christian music. She was afraid he was neglecting his work. I think he was to an extent, but apparently not enough, because he got some kind of promotion within a year of this event, and he was moving to Phoenix. But another reason he wanted to move there was this major mega church, and he was just feeling more and more called to ministry, and they needed some kind of executive pastor, business manager, and he was wondering if he might fill that position, and he was going to look into that. That whole year, though, he was so zealous for everything of the Lord. He felt like God had truly come to him and touched his life. And that empty spot that was inside, that no amount of wealth or good things and the blessings of this world could fill, it was filled because God had touched him. There's so many out there in the world like that today. They're hungering and thirsting for God. One thing I'm absolutely convinced about for the well-being and the future of this church, and I don't want us to do it just simply because it's a necessity, but it's also a mission imperative. I came to seek and to save the lost. That has to be our mission imperative. We have got to make more Christians. I believe the church is commissioned to make more Christians and better Christians. We have got to take seriously the mission imperative of Jesus Christ, because there's far too many Zacchaeuses out there just waiting for us to make more Christians, to call them into a way of life that can make all the difference and save them not only for heaven, but for this world as well.